the almost complete cessation of all aid and food coming in has made it much, much worse. And one case I really worry about was a young girl called Habiba who had a terrible explosive injury which really destroyed the lower part of her esophagus and her chest. I spent all night one night operating on her. She's being tube fed via a tube I put into her intestines. We are desperately trying to find more feed to keep her alive. The malnutrition in the newborns, in the small toddlers, in the young teenagers was awful.
A lot of a problem with the nutritional state in our Gaza Strip.
And there's a child who had
Habiba first,
yeah.
the intensive care unit. Okay. Feel happy to lead the conversation.
Yeah. So
I've just come out of the operation theatre having operated on a bad liver injury in a young man of only 40 but who was very malnourished, and I know deep in my heart that he has very little chance of survival.
Well, Nick, welcome home again. As you sit here now, back in this extremely safe place where you live, what are the images that stick in your mind after your most recent trip to Gaza? Can you tell me what they are? Can you list them for me?
yeah, I mean, it is lovely to be home, but I can't get those memories, those thoughts out of my mind. I think the overriding images that I have kept in my mind, keep thinking about, my patients that I've left behind, the many patients I have treated and been with over the last 4 weeks, those that have died, those that are still alive, those that remain critically ill, and I worry about. The staff, the friends, some of whom I've known for many years, new friends I've made over the last 4 weeks that I've met in Nasser Hospital. And I guess the other thing is just the overwhelming devastation of Gaza, which we saw all the time, but was particularly evident as we left Gaza on Tuesday when we went north and went through a land that really looked apocalyptic. I mean, it was just the widespread devastation, the destruction of all the buildings just will never leave me.
The most difficult moment in your last trip, in the last few weeks?
Patients dying. I mean, seeing the devastating injuries, the bomb explosive injuries, the horrific shootings I saw in young teenagers, sometimes in children, the appalling malnutrition, people dying of forced starvation, those were really very distressing indeed.
Well, look, let's get into that. You talk about the gunshot wounds to young people. I know that there's a story behind that. Can you tell me how those and in what circumstances, as far as you understand it, those injuries are inflicted?
Yeah, I mean, this is my third trip to Gaza since October the 7th, 2023, and many things were similar. The devastation of the land, the explosive injuries, the incessant bombings. But one big difference this time was the large numbers of severe gunshot wounds I saw. And they were almost exclusively from the food distribution points, the so-called named Gaza Humanitarian Foundation food distribution points. And we saw multiple fatalities and severe injuries in predominantly young teenage boys, some of them as young as 11 or 12, ranging up to 14, 15. And we saw many of these young boys being brought in with awful gunshot wounds. I'm a abdominal and thoracic surgeon, so I was seeing mainly gunshot wounds to the abdomen and to the chest, but my other colleagues saw terrible gunshot wounds to the head, the neck, the limbs, and we noticed a very clear pattern. The narrative, the stories, the background to all these we got from the patients, from their families, and indeed from colleagues of mine, Gazan healthcare workers, who themselves were going to these food distribution points to get food for their starving families. Indeed, one anaesthetist went out in between operations, rushed out because he heard there was food being delivered, went there to get food for his starving family. And the narrative is identical to all these shootings, that they're young boys, as young as 11, as I said, going to get food for their starving families, and being shot by Israeli soldiers, being shot by the quadcopter remote-controlled drones that everyone will have heard about. And even worse than that, we saw a really disturbing pattern of injuries that was first described to me by doctors in the emergency room who had noticed this for several weeks, and I saw with my own eyes as well, with the injuries I saw, of a cluster of different body parts being targeted on different days. So one day the kids will be coming in with gunshot wounds to the head and the neck. The next day they'll be coming in with gunshot wounds to the chest. The next day to the abdomen. And we saw significant clusters of those injuries. And on one day, 10 days ago, 12 days ago, 4 young teenagers all came in at the same time with gunshot wounds to their testicles, specifically targeting their genitals. And it was the clustering, the numbers, and the clustering on particular days was far too great for coincidence. It seemed to us that this was a clear, almost like a targeting practice, almost like a game. Today we're going to go for the head, tomorrow we'll go for the chest, the next day we'll go for the testicles. I would not have believed it were possible if I hadn't witnessed this with my own eyes.
The IDF categorically rejects the claims of intentional harm to civilians. I've got a statement they released here. And for the sake of clarity, the Army's binding orders, they say, prohibit forces operating in the area from intentionally firing at minors. But that's not your experience.
I can't talk about intent. All I can talk about is what I've seen with my own eyes, and it's inconceivable to me that the multitude of injuries I have seen can be anything other than direct targeting of these children.
I've got some video here, Nick, who I believe is one of your patients. This man, can you tell me this man's story?
Yes, he had devastating explosive injury to his abdomen, damaging his bowel seriously, but also damaging his perineum, the area between his genitals and his anus. He lost all the soft tissue around his perineum. He lost a lot of his bowel as well. And when I first met him, and he, as you can see in the video, he's profoundly malnourished. He was very, very thin when he came in. He survived, to be honest, against all the odds. We've had no nutrition to give him at all, quite miraculously. And this is something that the care these patients get from their families is remarkable. His families have been doing all the dressings to his terrible wounds. They've been sourcing food, God knows where from, and have been giving him food. And he is alive at the moment.
You're in no doubt about the lack of food, the food crisis in Gaza at the moment. Tell me about the evidence that you saw of that.
No, I mean, I'm not in doubt, and that's not an opinion. I mean, it's a fact. I mean, I can talk about the amount of food present in the hospital.
Why don't you tell me about that?
There is no food in the hospital. There is no food at all for patients and for staff there. The patients rely upon food being brought in by their families, and that is incredibly difficult to get. And if they do get food, it's very difficult to get them protein, which of course is very important for their tissue healing. So they're malnourished when they come in. They get more and more malnourished as they're in hospital. The amount of food being delivered to the food distribution sites is minimal, and we've talked about the devastating shootings going there, but the amount of food that's actually getting in to the population is very, very small amounts indeed. So colleagues of mine whom I worked with a year ago, I barely recognise. Some of them have lost 30 kilograms in weight, and they are starving. Surgeons I work with get phone calls, get messages from their families saying, one of them the other day got a message from his wife saying, I can't get up. I'm in the tent. They all live in tents, of course. His wife had said, I cannot get up. I'm feeling so weak. And he was the one that actually went out in between operations to one of the food distribution sites to get food. He came back covered in bruises and grazes.
How does this time, you've got vast experience of working in Gaza. It's always hellish because of the circumstances of the conflict and the way the war is being fought. What was different this time? Why was it worse? Why is it worse?
The malnutrition was far worse. The lack of food, the almost complete cessation of all aid and food coming in has made it much, much worse. I mean, to make it clear, there's never been enough food or aid coming into Gaza in the last 22 months. I think people know by now that on average 500 trucks a day were coming in before October 2023, just to give basic food and medical supplies. There's never been a day when that amount is coming in, and of course the need is much greater than it was before. So, and this was, we called out the beginnings of what we saw as malnutrition back in January 24. It was much worse when I was there last summer, but my God, this is much, much worse than we could have imagined. And it was very dramatic looking at all the patients and looking at all the staff as well.
You saw, you saw from a distance at least, Israel's new offensive in Deir al-Balah. What do you think the Israeli army is trying to achieve there right now? And what do you know of what they've done?
Having seen what they've done, having seen the widespread destruction of hospitals, the deliberate destruction of hospitals, and I don't mean just bombing hospitals, I mean going into hospitals and dismantling the whole apparatus of the hospitals, destroying the laboratories, destroying the scanners, destroying in Shifa Hospital every single dialysis machine, destroying the gas supplies, the oxygen supplies, the sewage disposal, the water supplies, having seen them targeting healthcare workers, friends of mine who have been killed out there, friends of mine who've been abducted, imprisoned for up to 6 months, tortured daily, the systematic dismantling of the whole way of life of Gaza. This is much, much more, it appears to me, than simply targeting Hamas militants. This is destruction of the whole infrastructure of living in Gaza. And it seems to me the only explanation for that is the clear aim of trying to eradicate all the Gazans from that land.
You're talking about ethnic cleansing.
I'm talking about ethnic cleansing. That's what it appears to me.
Israel, of course, would say that the hospitals you describe are used as command and control centres by Hamas fighters. Again, not your experience.
Not at all. I mean, I've been in these hospitals. In Nasser Hospital and Al-Aqsa Hospital, where I've worked, I've been to every single square inch of those hospitals. I have never been denied access to any part of the hospitals. I have never seen any evidence of people that would suggest to me they're Hamas militants. And much more importantly than my experience, the doctors and the nurses and other healthcare workers, some of whom I've known for 15 years, some of whom are like family to me, people I would trust with my life and indeed have trusted with my life. They have seen no evidence of that at all. So I do not believe there is any credible evidence to suggest that Hamas are using these hospitals as command centres. And indeed, the evidence that the Israeli military and government have provided for this is not remotely credible. So in my experience, I can only talk about what I've seen, but I've seen no evidence to support those contentions at all.
What is the world to do, Nick? I mean, you're at one remove now. You've come home. You've got some perspective on your trip. Yesterday, the government here was talking about how it's appalled and sickened by the plight of civilians in Gaza. Says it's horrifying that so many Palestinians have been killed while seeking aid. What do you think?
Well, it's all talk, but no action. And I mean that. Listen, of course we all welcome the change in the words coming from our government, but that is wholly inadequate in my view. And they're meaningless whilst they are still providing parts for F-35 jets. They're meaningless while they're still Israeli jets. They're meaningless while they're still welcoming Israeli politicians to our country. They're meaningless while the RAF is still flying reconnaissance flights every single day over Gaza. So it is totally inadequate. And what we need are actions from our government and not just words.
What would you like to see done?
I would like our government to be recognising that there is a genocide being carried out, recognising there are multiple war crimes being committed daily, listening to the evidence that people like me and many other healthcare workers are bringing back and have presented to our government already. There is no doubt they know what is going on, and they need to put pressure on the Israelis together with the US government to stop what is going on. Immediately, there needs to be aid, proper amounts of aid and food to be taken into Gaza, and we, of course, we need a permanent ceasefire.
Again, the Israeli military, the Israeli government rejects wholeheartedly the use of the word the use of the word genocide to describe its operation in Gaza. It says that is precisely not what's happening. That's not its objective. Again,
well, there are many international agencies, international lawyers who all suggest that what is being carried out is tantamount to genocide.
And that matches up with what you've seen with your own eyes?
Absolutely matches up with what I've seen with my own eyes.